Welcome to this week's edition of Rev'd Up. I'm Tyler Strong.
And I'm Leanne Brothers. Tyler, the drivers were down in Phoenix this past weekend.
I tell you, it's always an exciting time down there, the Valley of the Sun, the Jewel of the Desert. It was an exciting race as well. Let's go ahead and get into the highlights and see all what happened. You can see Mark Martin right there on the parade laps, the pole sitter leading them down later into the race. Ryan Newman blows a right front tire. Tire issues were a concern during the race. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the program. As you can see, Newman taking the short way back to his pits. Later on, about halfway through the race, Danica Patrick also blows a right front tire, hard hit into the outside wall, also collects David Reagan. She would be all right after that hard hit. Here's a crucial pit stop, though, late in the race. Casey Mears, you can see, blocks out Dale Earnhardt Jr., delays him from getting the lead, and he puts him into the second place. Here's the final restart of the race. Carl Edwards gets the whole shot, jumps ahead of Jimmy Johnson. He would go on to take the checkered flag in the Subway Fresh Fit 500. Carl Edwards finally getting to do his famous backflip. Been a while since he'd been able to do that, and also a little new routine celebration for him, going up into the stands and celebrating with the fans. It was a great victory for Carl Edwards. You can see just how excited he was. He would also go on to say later in his post-race press conference how this might have been the most important victory of his career. It was an exciting time of victory lane for the Roush Fenway driver, getting to celebrate with his crew once again. And Leanne, as we see them concluding their celebration there, it was also just big for Carl Edwards to get back into victory lane, as it is for any driver, but especially for Mr. Edwards. He had been out of victory circle for a while.
Yes, he had. Like you had said, that was his longest streak that he's ever gone in the sport. I mean, this week coming up would have been 2 years since he's been back to victory lane. That's a huge dry spell.
I tell you, it really is, especially for someone like Carl Edwards, who just a couple of years ago actually tied with Tony Stewart into the championship, or at the final race at Homestead. He tied with Stewart, but Stewart had the tiebreaker to ultimately take the championship. And Edwards actually, that snapped a 70-race winless streak. He had one other 70-race winless streak in his career, and you know where he snapped that streak at? He also snapped it at Phoenix. He did. He did. So two 70-race droughts for him without a victory, but he snapped them both at Phoenix. And I think it's good for the sport to see Carl Edwards back in victory lane. He's always a fan favorite.
And he was my pick, and he won.
He was. I have to say, I have to concede right there. It was an excellent pick, and it really was. And I think my pick, Clint Boyer, he got a top 10 out of it too, but congratulations on your winning pick there. That was impressive. It was. It was.
It was good, like you said, to see Carl Edwards back in victory lane, and I'm surprised he remembered how to do that backflip.
Yeah. I guess it's like riding a bike. You just never forget once you're able to do it. I know I can't do it though, but anyways.
A more important issue that we need to talk about, the race, we kind of saw the same thing at Daytona, very boring.
And it was.
There was a little bit more side-by-side racing than what we saw in Daytona, but still having trouble with those cars when they're in the pack.
Yeah.
Trying to race each other, they get really aero tight, and you just can't make passes in the car like you used to in the Generation 5.
Yeah, that's an excellent term you used there, that aero tight, and that's one thing the drivers have really been complaining about. Once they get around those other cars, like in those big packs like he talked about, and the packs aren't as big at Phoenix, obviously, as they would be at Daytona, but usually you see a lot more passing at places like Daytona, or we have in years past, than you would Phoenix. And so since we didn't see much at Daytona, we're like, well, maybe, it's reversed. We'll see more at Phoenix, but that wasn't the case, and the drivers weren't too happy about that. But as we'll talk about a little bit later in the broadcast there. You want to stay tuned for that. But it's just kind of a learning process with this Generation 6 car. And I think they'll eventually get it right. But right now it's just, a little bit frustrating to see what they're going through.
And the issue that everybody was talking about, of course, was tires. We saw it with like over half a dozen drivers had issues with the tire, talking about it was too hard for the new surface at Phoenix. So a lot of issues that NASCAR still needs to work on to improve these races, not only for the drivers and their teams, but for the fans as well. Oh,
I completely agree, and I think they will eventually get there. Like you saw there in the highlights, Danica Patrick blew a right front tire. Ryan Newman blew a right front tire, and the reason why they're blowing, and Goodyear actually talked about that, I think they released a statement during the race, is how at places like Phoenix, they're really hard on the brakes. It's really fast, but the corners are really tight there, and so they'll overuse their brakes, and that brake rotor inside that tire gets scalding hot. You can see, like, sometimes they put a camera in there and you can see them just get glowing red. And what that does, it melts a bead on the tire and it just blows the tire. And I think, with someone like Danica, she hasn't been at Phoenix. I think this is maybe her second or third race there, and she's just still learning exactly how she needs to manage her brakes. But I think NASCAR and Goodyear combined will figure out a way to get a good tire with this car, and it will produce some good racing when they do figure it out.
Yes, it will. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, make sure you stay tuned. We've got driver suspensions and fines, so we'll see you back here in just a minute.
If you're looking for a new pet that your family will cherish every day, consider adopting from a shelter. Shelters are the best places to find a new pet. That's where you'll discover healthy, loyal, and loving animals, eager to become a part of your family. A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet, so bring home your new buddy today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Today is a special day. Today we gather as a nation and as an international community to recognize the selfless decision of one of the most influential women of our time. She's been recognized by religious figures and politicians around the world. To us, she's just Rachel. But to the rest of the world, she's the woman who, after having one too many drinks, chose not to drive home buzzed. Here today to honor Rachel is the family whose lives she spared.
There are a million places you'd never consider texting. So why would you do it while driving? Leave risky driving to the professionals. Stop the texts, and together we can stop the wrecks.
Welcome back to Rev'd Up. Thanks for staying with us.
Tyler, we had a lot of issues this past week with suspensions as well as fines from NASCAR.
Yeah, there were actually several this week, and you usually don't hear of multiple drivers being suspended within the same week, or at least around the same week, but that happened in NASCAR this week. The first one that was suspended was Jeremy Clements. He's a Nationwide Series driver, and he's not as well known around the racing world, although he is a rather good up-and-coming driver looking to break into the bigger ranks. But this past weekend at Daytona, after the race, he was being interviewed by actually a writer from MTV. He was doing a one-on-one with Jeremy Clements, and I believe Clements thought he was off the record and made a rather off-colored comment and used a racial slur that some other people and some other reporters that were around him overheard. Now, what's interesting is the MTV news writer didn't initially report what was said, but another reporter that was around the scene overheard what was said, took it to NASCAR, and subsequently NASCAR suspended Jeremy Clements for the foreseeable future. And it was really the first instance this year that we've heard of a driver being suspended or getting in trouble with the NASCAR law, but actually turned out later in the week a bigger profile star in the sport got in trouble with NASCAR as well.
That's right, Tyler. Denny Hamlin also faced a fine this week, $25,000 to be exact, for making a comment about the Generation 6 car. And he said, quote, "If they suspend me, they suspend me. At this point, I really don't care." And NASCAR Vice President of Competition, Robin Pemberton, had said, you know, there's just a fine line of what you can and cannot say. We give them a lot of latitude and a lot of a grace period for comments that they make to reporters, and there's just a fine line when you start to slam the product. You just can't do that in NASCAR.
Especially when they're really trying to promote this Generation 6 car. You can see the commercials running on TV. NASCAR is so proud of this product, but as we mentioned in the opening segment, they're still really trying to fine-tune it. It's a work in progress, but obviously Denny Hamlin not too happy of where it is right now.
Yeah, and actually listening back to his conversation with Chris Devoto, who was the Fox reporter, he really didn't say anything, in my opinion, that really was bad and slammed the car. He talked about it being aerotight, which is no surprise. A lot of drivers have made the same kind of complaints, as well as the tire. Tire issues were a really big deal during this race.
They really were, and even in the press conference where he talked, he prefaced his comments saying, I don't mean to be a Denny Downer about it. That was a little interesting comment from him, but it came across as sincere, and he really wasn't trying to slam or badmouth the sport in any way. But if you actually follow Denny Hamlin on Twitter, he took to the social media site to really voice his opinion on what happened and really voice his displeasure. But as of this show right now, we don't really have an idea of whether he's paid the fine or whether NASCAR is going to take further action. So we'll obviously have that story as it progresses on further shows, but it'll be interesting to see what route Denny and NASCAR take with this.
It will, and you know, I've kind of been comparing this situation to others that have happened. I mean, it's no surprise that Brad Keselowski is known as Bad Brad, and he's made several comments to the media, just bad-mouthing other drivers or bad-mouthing the sport, as well as Kurt Busch. He's known as a bad boy, Kyle Busch. So there's notable names that stand out that have had issues before and haven't faced a fine. So why they tend to do that with Denny Hamlin and why they're taking this so much more seriously, I guess would be because of the Generation 6 car.
Yeah, I would believe so. If you think back to 2007 when they first came out with the car tomorrow, the first race they ran with it was at Bristol Motor Speedway, and Kyle Busch won the race, and afterwards he got out of the car. The interviewers were talking to him in victory lane saying, well, how do you feel? You obviously won with the car. You're obviously pretty happy with it, or we think you would be. And Kyle Busch got out of the car and said, well, I still hate to drive these things, and quote unquote, they suck. So Kyle Busch was obviously not happy with that car then, and Denny Hamlin's not happy with it now. But like you said, it's interesting the route that NASCAR's taken with him to fine him $25,000 for a little statement, and NASCAR PR has got their hands full right now trying to corral this situation.
Yes, they do, and as of right now, like we had said, they're not, he's refusing to pay the fine, so we'll have to continue to follow this story and update you as we get more information about it. But, I mean, I'm interested to see what happens this next race when we go to Vegas. And we'll have our picks for next week as well as information about the Bristol race coming up. So you'll want to stay tuned, and we'll be back right after this.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
What if a disaster strikes without warning? What if life as you know it has completely turned on its head? What if everything familiar becomes anything but? Before a disaster turns your family's world upside down, it's up to you to be ready. Get a kit, make a plan, be informed today. Learn how at ready.gov.
Up, college is hard. Down, those books are heavy.
My sport is football, but my passion is education.
Right up here.
So every year, I take promising high schoolers on a college tour
Lights there, darts there.
to show them that higher education means a brighter future. My name is Nnamdi Asamoah. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Find out how you can live United for education. Give, advocate, volunteer. Go to liveunited.org.
Do you wear this?
Hey.
Ready to go?
Yeah, but the fire's not out.
Close enough.
Close enough? If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. I mean, the next thing you know, you've torched our whole neighborhood.
Which is why we're not going anywhere?
Exactly. 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us, Tyler. They're headed to Vegas, Sin City.
I know, Viva Las Vegas, always a fun race down there for the drivers and the fans alike. Of course, going to Las Vegas, you're going to have a good time down there. But I tell you, it's a fun track to watch them race on as well. It's a very fast track. When they first started going there, it was relatively flat. But here, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe, they repaved it. They have variable banking there now, and it's more typical of like the more mile and a half or under tracks that you see on the schedule. The cars fly around that place. It's deceptively fast. When you watch the race, it's going to be really fun to watch, especially with this Generation 6 car, to see how it handles in the big packs when they're doing, you know, about 150 to 190 plus throughout the whole race. So it's going to be fun to watch. A lot of things we're going to have to look out for, including some drivers who could potentially win.
Yes, my pick. I think Mark Martin is going to be strong. He was really strong at Phoenix. He's been off to a good start this season, although he hasn't really had the finishes to show for it. He's been really strong. He qualified on the pole at Phoenix and led happy hour practices. He was at the top. So my pick for this week is Mark Martin.
It's interesting you mentioned him because he doesn't have some of the desired finishes like he would like, but all in all, they're not that terrible. But the way you've seen him practice and the way you've seen him qualify, and even in the early stages of the races, you think his finishes would be better. And he's only running a partial schedule, but he's still 7th in the standings. So I think that's a good choice. And my pick, I think I'm going to have to go with Kyle Busch, another Toyota driver like Mark Martin. The Toyotas have been strong at Las Vegas. They've been testing there yesterday. This past Thursday, they tested there. Toyotas were in the top 5 in speed. Kyle Busch is from Las Vegas, and so I think those are some pretty good choices. I think a Toyota will win.
Now just keep in mind though, you can't pick the same driver to win twice, 2 weeks in a row. And you know Kyle Busch is really good at Bristol, and that's next week.
That's true. That's true. I think I'll stick with him. I think I'm going to stick with him for Las Vegas. I think I'm on a little Toyota streak here. I picked Matt Kenseth to win Daytona, Clint Boyer to win last week, and now Kyle Busch to win this week. And I'm going to have to mix up the bag a little bit for next week at Bristol, but it's going to be a fun race to look forward to next week. But this Sunday, make sure you tune in for the race at Las Vegas.
Yes, 2:30 on Fox.
And 2 o'clock on MRN radio. So just if you want to listen to it on the radio, got to throw that in there.
Yeah, if you're in the car and you can't watch the race, that's good to throw that out there.
I tell you, I love it. If you want to get the whole experience of a race right there, I tell you, listen to it on the radio. It may seem a little bit boring when you first hear about it, but give it a listen. You never know, you may like it.
And like we said, we've got Bristol next week. We're also on spring break, so we won't be here. But make sure you tune in the following week, and we will have highlights from both Las Vegas and Bristol. So you're going to want to make sure you tune in for that.
And if the Bristol race next week is anything like the fall race last year, we're going to have plenty to talk about. Maybe some angry drivers and, well, who knows what. Just make sure you tune in for the next episode of Rev'd Up to see all that.
Yes, and it'll be the first trip for the Generation 6 cars on a short track. So that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out too. But we're all out of time for now. We will see you all in a couple weeks. Thanks for staying tuned.